No one is ever ready. I don't know why.
I
Well,
usually am,
yeah.
given the fact that I do this as part of my living.
I
But
know
what can
you
I
have so much experience at that, and that's so funny. But so I'm going to start by not forgetting to introduce myself. So I am Jackie. I am one of the two hosts of Jackie and Irvin Are Accidentally in Charge, which is our crazy podcast. And welcome to our show. And you are?
I'm Aaron Strout, and former CMO of Real Chemistry, and podcaster, book author, and dad, and husband, and all those fun things. And I love your skulls on your shirt, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I'm rather obsessed with skeletons and bats, and I was a goth girl in the 90s and some things hung over. And this weekend is my birthday weekend. So very unusually for me, like I'm actually wearing sort of me clothes because usually I'm wearing more like work stuff when I record because I'm usually either like about to go to work or coming from work. So it's a
Well,
little
we're doing
more
it on a
festive
Friday
today.
afternoon, as it should be.
Yeah, it makes
And
me
happy early
happy.
birthday.
Thank you. This is my birthday present for real. So I was so excited that you said yes. And I know you're one of the people that probably actually understands that feeling because, I had an interview yesterday with Phil Gerbyshak, and it's the first time a video of mine has broken double digits. And like,
Oh,
I'm just
nice.
like, oh, super exciting. So I don't have a big audience. This is a very homegrown project, but it's absolutely a work of love. And I think I first ran across you when you were actually asking for podcast guests, and I don't know how we got linked up, but we have a big overlapping social map. So, and I immediately was like, I know some people because I would love for them, some of my guests, to actually get out there and get a little more exposure than I'm able to give them right now. So, anyway. Really excited to have you. So I know you also just published a book and that you're in the middle of publicizing that. So we can talk a little bit about that. Maybe start there.
Yeah.
Tell me about your book.
Well, I happen to have a copy here, so I'll flash it up.
Hooray.
It's called Wired for Purpose. And I know you had a chance to listen to the first edition of the rough cut of the audio of the intro chapters. But it's three overarching points. So one of which is I'm 57. I started early days of digital. My dad was actually a computer programmer back in the 70s. And so I was doing
Mine too,
technology.
by the way. So
Not
we'll get
shocking,
there.
not
Yeah.
shocking. I get those vibes from you in a positive way. So my dad was doing computer programming back in the 70s when, the internet was not a thing and
Oh,
technology was barely a thing. And so
I was
when
barely a thing in the 70s. Yeah, I made it by 1 year.
well, there you go, because you are younger than I am. And so I learned technology early days. I went to a direct marketing agency out of grad school and learned direct marketing, realized that there was this thing called the World Wide Web. It was going to be powerful. The direct marketing agency I was at wasn't going to get there fast enough. And so I went to Fidelity Investments and sort of became a leader in their digital efforts. And then, fast forward up until recently, I've had the opportunity to be early days of things like online community, social media, mobile media, location-based marketing, and now we have this thing called generative AI. And so
Oh,
I've
yes, we
always been
do.
very curious and tried to differentiate between what's fact and what's fiction. So that's one of the legs. The other is practicing things like rational optimism, being sort of calm under pressure, um, doing something that I like to call networking as a service, and that's meeting people, and not because I'm trying to monetize them, but because I like to add value to other people's lives, and I like to have a large network of important people and friends. And the last is this gratitude. I call it the gratitude engine. So just being a serial thank you note writer and recognizer, and patting people on the back for work well done, and again, not in a performative way. And then
Right.
how did we take all of these things and apply them to the building of a few of the companies that I worked at, but in particular Real Chemistry, which when I joined we were about a $45 million company, and when I left we exited about a $3.1 billion valuation, 650 million in revenue. So I was not the only one responsible for it. It was a team, but I would say I was one of probably a dozen that had a outsized impact on how we went to market. We didn't
Mhm.
spend millions of dollars. We did a lot of it through the various lessons that I learned along the way. And so the book is a codification of that to try to help people. If I were to write that letter to my younger self, here's things you should do to get further faster in life. And if I can help people cut a few years out of their career to get to the peak point, then, hopefully that's helpful.
That's fantastic, and I actually really can't wait to read it then, just hearing the outlines of it, because those are pretty much, I mean, you checked off all of the themes of my podcast right there, and a lot of the work that I'm trying to do now is kind of pulling those threads together, but I don't have the kind of, past experience that you're talking about of actually doing it. So it's really exciting to get that information from someone who's been, doing that work.
Well, I, like I said, it's, I do like to hang with like-minded people. And part of when you came, actually, the reason why you and I connected was I started a new LinkedIn series called Interesting People I Think You Should Know. And
I've been
so
looking.
the hard part, the good and the bad part of the Reaching Higher podcast, which is my current podcast effort, is it's influential people that are doing societal good. And so I've had people like Al Roker from the Today Show, and Adrian Grenier, the actor, and Aloe Black, the singer, Dr. Vanessa Carey, who is John Kerry, the former Secretary of State's daughter, doing amazing things on her own. And these are people that I have to be a little protective of who I bring onto the show, because not that I want to be exclusionary, but I can't just bring anyone. But I also have all these really smart, cool, fun people that I want to bring to bear. So this woman, Lisa Brick, that I met recently, she's a researcher. I was like, you know what, she'd be a great one. And so that's the series that I'm doing. And so I'm always trying to find people that are interesting and then give them a platform. And so this is a new way for me to be able to do that. And, hopefully the book also builds me a bigger platform so I can continue to help society fix some of its ills and, do positive things.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I was looking at some of the materials, and, I'm just looking at so many. You do so many different things, like many of the people I bring on.
Too many things, but yes.
Yeah, but and there is a common thread. Like you can see the pattern, but basically, I'm skipping around in the pages I had open, but the part that jumped out at me was this part about more than the technology, it was the human patterns, right? About being human. And like you kind of end on that note on a few of these summary pages. And that's such an interesting way to put it, because of all the conversation that's happening now about AI and like what's happening, and this idea of like being a human, being a person, being like an individual, and I don't know, I feel like there's a common thread between a lot of the people that I'm bringing on, where, Brian Kramer, same thing, Human to Human was his book, and there's something about like connecting as people, I think that runs through all of these different projects. So I don't know, tell me, like, how did you get from, I remember one of the first conversations I ever had with you was about Russian studies. I love to go see what people studied in college. It's always comically different from what they do for work too. But yeah, how did you get from like where you started, doing the Russian studies, and why did you start with that? And then how did you go from there to where you are now,
Well, I'm actually going to start from the book and work backward, because one of the things my publisher, John Wibben, who runs Captain of Books, who helped me tremendously with the book project, was able to help me see and thread through is my whole life has been these sort of zigging when other people were zagging. So going all the way back to like, my grandmother worked in state politics, like early days when women were not doing state politics in Maine. And my dad was a computer programmer, as we talked about at the top of the show, before people were really doing, this is like punch card stuff, not, typing on a fancy computer. So I took the sort of odd path of doing Russian studies because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I was pretty good at English. I was pretty good at math. I was pretty good at science. I had taken French for about 8 years between private lessons with a friend and then doing it all the way through high school, but I didn't think I really wanted to be a French major.
Yeah, why did you study French?
So the funny thing was, this is another anomaly, is like my mom's family, Podunk town in Maine, had and by the way, I apologize, I have a little bit of allergies going on today, so I'm a little congested.
No worries.
they had a Norwegian exchange student, which no one in Podunk, Maine had back in the day. And so they were very internationally minded. And so they taught their kids to speak in English and in Norwegian, but they're like, you should learn another language as well. And so French was the language. And so I was like, French seems pretty good. I want to go over to France at some point and, to be able to have another
French is on my list right now. All the French that I know was taught to me by Germans, so I know how to say "Je suis un petit fromage" and
Yeah.
What else? The vache qui rit, the laughing cow, like the
I love it.
cheese. Yeah,
Those,
that's it.
well, and that's
So,
some of it, right? Is like good wine, good cheese, good food in France. So there are worse
yes.
languages on that, Italian and others. So anyway, to wrap this story up, I decided when I got into undergrad at UMass Amherst, Gorbachev was in power. He was the premier of the Soviet Union because Russia used to be part of this bigger sort of entity called the Soviet Union.
Right.
So I started to study and I was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. I like the language. I like the economics, the culture.
Did you go to Russia?
So I did do 2 different summers in Russia. The first time it was Leningrad in the Soviet Union. And the second time it was St. Petersburg in Russia. Turns out it's the same place, but with different names. And I really liked it. And so I did undergrad, and I realized by the time I was done with that, I probably needed a little bit more because my goal was to do some sort of a business language culture mix up. So like a joint venture. Mm-hmm. Well, 1991, when I was in my first year of grad school at Georgetown, the Soviet Union dissolved. And that created chaos. And so we went from learning out of history books to learning out of the newspaper. Did go over there in 92, and while it was a little bit chaotic,
oh my gosh,
yeah. And so anyway, I realized like the dust needs to settle for a while, and because I had these technology roots, I sort of leaned back on that, and I started doing some database architect work.
Okay.
And the woman that was the VP of marketing at the company I was working for, when my contract was up, was like, "Hey, my parents need an account executive. They run this small direct marketing firm. They'll teach you how to be an account executive in direct marketing if you can keep their servers running and their email going and all that good stuff." And so that was what started to head me down the path of marketing. And then the World Wide Web was born. And so I was like, I can teach my stuff this shit. And so I did. And I'm not sure if I can swear on the show, but
oh yeah, you absolutely can.
So, that was where I went. And because I was early days, like I just sort of made stuff up as we went along. And and I had enough of the, how do you do direct marketing?
Were you still on the East Coast then?
I was in Fidelity Investments in Boston, 100 Summer Street for anybody in Boston.
Which also explains why we have such a huge overlapping Boston connection. Because I know a lot of our mutual people are kind of from that zone, Yeah.
What do they say? You can take the boy or the girl out of Boston, but you can't take the Boston out of the boy or the girl, right?
I've never been to Boston.
Oh, you haven't?
My whole life, I've been meeting people from Boston, but I've never actually been there.
So you have a Boston vibe, Jackie. So I
apparently, but I meet them, and like I met my first friend from Boston in Europe when I was 18, bumming around, like wandering around. I think I was in Rome, and it just hasn't stopped since. Like there's one from every era of my life. Like they just kind of pop. But I always meet them in like some obscure, weird place that's not Boston. So there you go.
We are everywhere, including on the West Coast.
Yeah, there is a corridor that jumps back and forth between those. I don't know. I don't like our mutual overlapping friend circle is a whole different topic. But back to so we were talking about the early days and how you got into technology, and then we were going from there to like how you got to the work that you do now. So now you're doing the Wired for Purpose book, and what else do you do now?
Well, I do still carry on some of my marketing chops because I am doing some fractional CMOing for a couple of different clients, and so that keeps me busy. And then I am on a couple of boards, one of which is the Tiger Lily Foundation, and so I'm the vice chairman on that. They're focused on Black and Asian women that are recovering from triple negative breast cancer and helping on the clinical trial front. And so that's keeping me busy. I also produce a local podcast for our country club. I did that this morning. I get to be one of the co-hosts this morning to sub in. And part of that is
you've already hosted a podcast this morning.
I have. And part of that is actually for selfish reasons because my son Benjamin is the producer for my show, and then he actually does the sound engineering for this podcast, the Contra Costa Confidential.
Too
And
wonderful.
so I get him paid, by doing both of those efforts. And the more he's a college kid, so the more I can get him paid, the more I can sort of help keep
I'm
him up my
cracking up.
payroll.
I have a 20-year-old son who helps me with the technology for this all the time. And we actually interviewed him for the podcast series because he was helping us fix the sound. And I was like, well, you're here. You're going to get interviewed now. So it's totally like, I'm like, I know what that's like to have a
Yep.
kid that is skilled in those areas. So that's fantastic.
No, my son's got like literally 10,000 hours of audio engineering because he's been a musician and has spent the last 10 years, even though he's 24, literally, playing around with GarageBand and all of the different,
Oh no,
softwares.
Yeah, we're gonna have to connect those two then, because it sounds like there's some strong parallels there. Mine started doing GarageBand on my phone when he was 11 because we had a gap between when I dropped his sister off for elementary school and him for junior high. And we didn't want to like drive all the way back to Gilroy, so we would just sit in the coffee shop, and he was bored. So he stole my phone and started making electronic music in GarageBand, and he has not stopped since. Like that's like his passion. So
that's awesome.
It's I don't know, they're so creative, these younger generation. They're like incredible. I don't know. But anyway, I could talk about my kids all day, and I do.
We should. We spend a lot of time. Yeah, we spend a lot of time rearing them. But I do want to come back to a point that you made, Jackie, because I think it's not an insignificant one.
Sure.
And so I did title the book specifically "Wired for Purpose," and then the subhead is "Why Humanity is the Biggest Differentiator in a Digital World." And so the somewhat ironic thing is, I mentioned I literally have been doing technology since I was about 7 or 8 years old. And so that's 50 years, right? And I'm the biggest believer in technology. I use AI, generative AI, in like all facets of my business and my life. And so I use a platform for my podcast called Riverside, and that's got some great AI tools built into it. I use Gemini, which is Google's LLM. I just recently signed up for Claude, which I'm loving, which is Anthropic's.
That's the one I'm using right now.
I play around a bunch with Copilot, which I have access to through work. And so I love technology. But when we started noodling about the title of the book, my publisher and me, this was again like 10 months ago, we did have AI as one of the options. And I said, John, here's the thing is, I think like AI is going to play a major role in the book and it's not going away. But I would like to lean more into the humanities side because I'm a big believer that one, by the time the book comes out, everyone's going to be talking about AI.
Sure.
And two, I do believe that AI is best done when it's done with a human companion because we have things like empathy and intuition and an ability to build trust. And so I'm a big believer in sort of that last miling it with the human, but using the AI for the scaffolding. So you want to come up with an outline, you want to come up with some ideas, you want to stress test your ideas, you want to come up with a draft of something, do that. But also make sure you've got a good basis and make sure you're doing a hell of a lot of fact checking because anyone, I'm sure, listening to this that has used generative AI realizes the propensity to hallucinate is strong, especially the less knowledge base it has or content it has to work with. And it can say things that, like, I asked it to write a post for me the other day, thought I was being pretty clear with my prompt, and it wrote it in like sort of the opposite voice of what I wanted it to be written in. And I was like, wait, nope, okay, let me rewrite the prompt and let me rethink this. And so, it just takes some iterations of getting it there versus like, oh, I used AI, it's done, let me go, hit publish and we're off to the races.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about, the AI slop phenomenon and how people are just sort of like using it thoughtlessly, maybe, and I do see that there's a big distinction between the people that are using it in a helpful way and the people that are just like using it with that carelessness, and the output is really obvious when you put them side by side. You can see a huge gap between those. So
for sure. I've been nodding my head vigorously for anyone that's not watching this.
So. That's right. I know not everybody is going to be able to see, but yeah. So similar to you, my father was also a software engineer. He was a civil engineer when I was young. They didn't really have software engineers yet. Like it was, same time period. and he moved us to the Bay Area '89, right after the big earthquake. So it's funny because it was during the period where they were playing the videos constantly of like the bridge falling, and we got here in December of '89, so it was like right after that
That's crazy.
happened.
Yeah.
And we came from South Texas, so like all anybody in Texas was seeing on TV all day long was just like the endless loop video of that happening, and they all just were like, "You're all gonna die in an earthquake. Like, what are you doing moving to California?" And we're like, "Actually, we haven't had any since we got here."
Well,
It's
and the
like
crazy thing about that
comical,
is because this is pre-internet, right?
right?
Is the only I wouldn't say the only reason I knew about it, but the main reason I knew about it was because that was the Battle of the Bay World Series in '88 or
Yeah.
'89, and so what people don't know if they haven't been out here is Oakland is on one side of the bay and San Francisco's on the other. And so the easiest way to get across
Oh,
from one to the other was on the Bay Bridge, and the Bay Bridge happened to get broken. And so that made it really difficult. You know, obviously, there were much bigger repercussions for people that lived here and couldn't get to
yeah.
work and all that. But just from like a simple baseball perspective, that was the thing that really put it on
I
the map for
think
me.
we were at some of those games because we had just gotten to California, and it was Jose Canseco and Mark McGuire, and like, and we rode Bart for the first time. It was my first time riding Bart was to that one of those baseball games. I don't even know which one it was, but yeah, I remember all of that at the time and it being like this huge thing. And unfortunately, whatever game we went to, I don't even remember which side we were on or who we were rooting for or anything, but whoever it was, they lost terribly, and it was like that was the end of my interest in it. Not
Yeah,
fun.
I can't remember who won that one either. But so I think it was the A's, but yeah, I don't remember for sure.
Yeah, I can't. It was too long ago now, but that's so funny. Yeah, so we got here '89, and my dad started working for Apple Computer in 1992. Was when he started his actual career as a software engineer. So like I was probably 13 or so around then. So I was one of the kids that was like running around the Apple campus back when it was the Rainbow Apple and the Birkenstocks and the whole thing, like, you know, beer busts on Fridays and people playing Nerf in the hallways. And I grew up in Silicon Valley. Like I was just, you know, kid of the industry. And it wasn't until very, very recently and some of these conversations that I've had on the podcast that I had any idea how strange that childhood was, because to me it was just the backdrop to, you know, Silicon Valley, and it was normal, I guess, for me. But up until recently, I didn't realize that that was unusual. So yeah, my roots with technology go back pretty far too, but I didn't take the same path. You know, I went a different
No,
direction.
well, I
So.
mean that's the beauty of all of us, right? But that definitely
Hmm.
makes you an OG because those are early days of Silicon Valley. Like it was almost like Silicon Valley was just becoming a thing at that point, right? Because Apple and HP and
Yeah.
Google didn't exist, and Microsoft was becoming a thing. You know, it was definitely a thing, but it was not the behemoth that it is today. And Amazon didn't exist, so Amazon
Well,
obviously is north of us. But
and you know, it's funny because I don't think I've really talked about my dad a lot in any of this up until now, and it's only, I think, because you brought up your dad and, you know, the punch cards and the stories that you were telling in some of these essays that I've been reading. And I was thinking about, you know, he worked at Apple, eBay, Adobe, Microsoft, and then a couple of startups that I don't remember, and then eventually retired from Apple. So there's not a major Bay Area company that like my dad didn't have some hand in, and he was often like a system software engineer. He was very like kind of the kind of people that you don't know what they do and you'll never understand it even if you wanted to, you know, backbone of the industry or whatever. So all throughout my social media stuff that came later, and I didn't get onto Twitter until like maybe 2010 or so, and it was kind of already um, had taken off and it was blowing up. You know, I was not an early adopter of that either. I kind of came in the
you
middle
were
of
pretty
the
early. I mean, I
craziness.
know you
You know,
weren't 2007, but
yeah,
2010
yeah.
was pretty early still. So
It was like it was when it was really like blowing up huge. But that's around when I started swimming. But so you know, I was going to a lot of these social media marketing, you know, Dreamforce, all these things, and the whole time I didn't really tell people about my family history or like the growing up in these companies. And so, they would be talking about, people would be talking about Steve Jobs, or they'd be talking about people, and it's like my dad worked for him. I had a very different perspective the whole time, and I just didn't really ever share that with people because it was more fun to kind of come in and have them not know that I had any back knowledge of what was going on. But it did color my experience of watching, Facebook become a thing and Google kind of become a behemoth, and like Apple itself has changed dramatically. Like it's,
Yeah,
now it looks like a spaceship. It's
I
just
know.
a totally different place.
Well, remember Apple was
So,
for nerds and like only, 5% of the population had it, and usually it was the creative types, and now literally you're a
oh
nerd if you
God,
don't have an
you know,
iPhone or a MacBook Pro.
Um, I have talked a lot recently about, my burgeoning understanding that I'm neurodivergent and what that is, and exploring that. And it really did hit home the other day that almost everyone I knew in the worlds I grew up in was very much so. We just didn't have language to describe it
Yeah.
back then. And people just, they've made a niche for that where people could be the way they were, and it was okay, because they had skills and superpowers that allowed them to do unusual work. And so they just kind of built the culture around that in the early days, and that has changed because I think they brought in, kind of opened the floodgates to everyone, and the culture had to change to accommodate like a wider variety of people. But yeah, the early days were some very strange individuals walking the halls. So it
Well,
was a different
and to
time.
your point, it's a lot of the best technologists were neurodivergent, right? And that was why they were able to focus. And I say this as I have three kids that are all neurodivergent, and
Yeah.
I love them all. And they do amazing things, and they all have different superpowers. And the good news is, like through therapy and medication and experience,
Mhm.
they've all sort of figured out how to work around them to be able to fit into the degree that they need to into society, right? Because that's the hard part, is society is getting better about it. We are normalizing a lot of it, but there's still quite a bit to be understood. And there's still a bit of a pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of thing.
Mhm.
One of my children is bipolar, and it's one of those
Mm.
things where it's like you wouldn't tell someone with cancer or diabetes to pull themselves up by the bootstraps.
No. Yeah.
And just because of the fact that it happens to be in the brain where the wiring is different than a disease that's sort of eating at a part of their body or ruining their organs, like that's not a pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of thing, right? You don't tell an alcoholic, hey, you should really pull yourself
Yeah.
up by the bootstraps. It's let's get you the help that you need, and
So
let's be empathetic about what you're doing about it.
I
So
try to be careful what I say about this because it's a family thing too. But so I have an immediate family member that has bipolar 1, and I'm very, very familiar with it from the inside. And you can even feel my, like, to this day, I'm protective. I won't reveal who that individual is or anything because it is stigmatized, it is judged, it can impact people's work situation. I had to go a big portion of my life keeping that a very carefully guarded secret from the world, pretty much because there could have been repercussions for letting that information out. So
mhm.
I definitely know a lot about that in particular, and have lived experience of what that's like to have a family dealing with that.
It's really,
So
I mean,
mhm.
pardon my French, it's really fucking hard.
Yeah.
And it can break you if you let it, right? I know with my wife and me, it's made us stronger, and we've worked through it with our kids. And, and I've had other family members as well that have been, suffered from it, some diagnosed, some undiagnosed. But
Mhm.
it is one of those things that it's just, it breaks my heart that there's not much known about it. And it breaks my heart that people still don't they want to be empathetic, but at the same time, they're just not, they can't wrap their head around it. So I guess it's hard for them to do that. Right. And so
Yeah.
anyway, we don't have to keep beating a dead horse, but
No,
I'm
it's
sorry that you've gone through
important.
it. And
Mhm.
to everyone out there listening, I'm sorry if you are going through it because it's hard.
It is, and, you know, again, the information that's out there about it is not always accurate, and it's one of the things where, I'm a big believer in getting professional help for mental health conditions and a big advocate for that, and I do that myself when I
Yep.
need to, So I actually did a project called 100 Unicycles where I painted pictures, and I have one on the wall behind me, so you can kind of, let's see if I can get it in there. There we go. So I painted
Oh yeah.
100
Very
of these,
cool.
and they were a numbered series. And it took me about 2 years to finish, and it raised money for San Francisco suicide prevention. And that's because in 2013, I did go through a dark period where I had some mental health issues and became actively suicidal at one point, and I did get the help that I needed. But after I was through it and on the other side, I wanted to do something to reach out to other people that were in a similar situation and do something to give back. So mental health is definitely a thing that's very close to my heart. There was a teenager at my kid's school that just committed suicide this year, and same age as my youngest child, and it really just tore at my heart to see that. And anything we can do to get people to get professional help, like, I'm just going to keep ringing that bell all the time. Like, if there's something going on, please, like, go talk to someone who can actually give you the care that is needed. And people are afraid to talk about it. They're
Yep.
afraid to be stigmatized, and I understand, like, that's why I'm open about talking about my stories, because I don't want other people, there's people that can't talk about what they're going through, and I can, so I want to, do as
Well,
much as I can.
3 things. If this was my show, I'd say thank you for sharing that, because that's a really like close to the heart story, and bless you for doing what you did to help support. And I think the last one is just, this was the hard conversation that we, had to have during that process for our kids. It was trying to get them to sort of look longer out and to say, look, I don't know what you're going through, but I know whatever it is, there will be a brighter sort of side to it at some point in time, with the right meds and with the right
Yeah.
therapy. And as you get older and have better perspective, but when you're in it, and it's like being in the middle of a nightmare. It seems so real
Hmm.
when you're in it, and someone can't come in and say like, hey Jackie, guess what, you're just having a nightmare right now. You're like, I'm in the nightmare, like I
Yeah.
can't wake up from it until I wake up from it. And so it's a really tricky thing. But I totally agree with you, and it's part of why I love doing my pod, is having people that are raising awareness around mental health. I just had a gentleman on recently, Dr. McCowan, who is doing amazing things with youth, and helping
Hmm.
them with addiction, helping them with global climate change, helping them with mental health. And just the empathy and the understanding and the way that he approached it was really profound. So anyway, like I said, we don't have to keep going down the path, but I
Yeah, I'm
am
sorry.
grateful
It
that you are
it
doing
took
what
a
you're doing.
serious turn, but it's just, I think it,
This is part of being human, though, right? This is
and
humanity right here.
that story about the it's not even a teenager I knew or anyone that my kids knew, but it's the being the age of my child and being able to put myself in the shoes of that parent in a really visceral way. And it just really hit home, because sometimes we get busy and we get to our regular life problems or whatever, and I start to feel like, oh, that project that I did, that wasn't that important or whatever. And it's like, if I got even one person out of a dark place, it was worth it. Like, every bit of work I did for that was worth it. And it just brings it home that, like, we don't know what impact our work has on other people. We may never know, but you have to believe that, like, every little bit counts, right?
I mean,
And
that
yeah.
is like the $64,000 answer right there, Jackie, is if you can help one person, and you
Hmm.
don't know. I mean, because flipping it around, you don't know what anyone's going through on any given day. And so you don't know. I think all you can do is show up and try to put good into the world. And no, I'm a big believer in karma. And I believe that if you put good into the world, good comes back to you. Maybe that's a little Pollyannish, yeah. Um, but I've
I
seen more
always
good
loved
than
those
not.
stories. It's like, what was it, Pollyanna? Isn't it a Disney movie? And I haven't seen that in a really, really
I
long
think it
time.
actually
So
predates that. To be Pollyanna
yeah,
is like, I think there was a story about, someone where everything was great and everything was rose-colored glasses, and so it's been co-opted by Disney. But
sure.
it is the
Disneyfication.
idea, you know. everything's fine, everything's great, don't worry about it, everything will be okay, and we
But
know that
even
that's
like
not the case.
when I was really little, one of my favorite movies of all time was Heidi, the one with Shirley Temple in it, and she has a very Pollyanna character too,
Yes.
and I like The Little Princess is another favorite. And, like, there are all these stories where like there's this person and like all this bad stuff happens, but they stay optimistic, and then somehow like it transforms things. And I love that storyline, and I think it is often sort of mocked, and I think it's a good way to be. So.
Well, and that's part of what I talked about in the book is rational optimism, which is not being Pollyanna, it's not being doom and gloom, and it's really sort of shooting down the middle. And one of the things that I likened it to was something called flight attendant energy, right? So it's this idea of anyone that's ever been on an airplane and it's gotten turbulent, the first thing you do is you look at the flight attendants to say, are they reacting? Are they nervous? Are they running to their jump seats? Do they have that like holy crap look on their face? And if they do, then it makes you nervous. If they don't, you're like, okay, everything must be okay. And so anyway, and by the way, I
And
did a
that's
quick
why I
Google
could
search.
never be a flight attendant because I would totally act
You wear your heart on
panicked and
your
like
sleeve.
no,
Yeah,
I would do it just to be like annoying. Like now that you've planted that idea in my head, I'm just
I
like, oh,
love
that
it.
would be a fun experiment to like run around acting panicked and then like freak out and be like, no, no, it's
You and
really.
I have a similar sense of devious to us. I did, by the way, look up in 1913. There's a book that came out that was focused on a woman or a girl named Pollyanna Whittier, and
Oh,
so that was the original impetus of Pollyanna. So now we know.
oh, how fantastic! I'm gonna have to go check that out.
Yeah.
See, it's always when we think we've invented something, then it turns out that like humans have been doing it for a really long time and we just have like the latest iteration of it.
Well, and that is the thing that pisses me off is that I mean, like just in the United States, and I geek out about this stuff. So thanks for giving me a platform. But we have this idea of like, well, when Christopher Columbus came, that's when things were, born. It's like we go back probably 30 or 40,000 every day. It's like we find out we're like another 5,000 years earlier because people came over from Asia and people came over and settled here. And it's like, I know you want to be that like snowflake that thinks that you are original, but there are a lot of people that came and did a lot of amazing things before we were here. And, I think it's disrespectful not to pay that more homage.
Sure, yeah. I get interested in, again, back to the neurodivergence, I get interested in certain topics and then I get very obsessive about them. And I developed an amused interest in camel art, which it turns out that like there are a lot of really old artworks about camels because it was a thing that was there.
It was
And
one of the early days of
it's
transportation, right?
oh my gosh, some of the things are the most amazing pieces of art I have ever seen. And they're about camels and they are the funniest things. But it'll be like, this bronze sculpture of a camel that's like thousands of years old and it's just completely hilarious, and it's like, I guess we have this idea that like all antiquated art is very serious and like, Grecian columns and like marble statues. And then you're like, no, they had a sense of humor too. So,
Yep.
yeah. Anyway, we have veered far off topic, but I love it. I don't know. So, yeah, all of the guests that I have had
Oh,
so
Jesus.
far.
Sorry, we just had a bolt of lightning or of thunder. And living in the Bay Area, we don't ever get thunder and lightning here, and it scared the crap out of me. And the dogs are barking right now.
I'm in Morgan Hill, so I'm not all that far from you, and like it's also raining here, but I don't have the thunder happening right now, so we must be just far enough that I'll probably like get it in an hour
Like a
or
cannon
something.
going
Yeah.
off. And again, anyone that lives in a place with thunder and lightning, I'm originally from New England, lived in Austin for a while. With Texas, you get your thunderstorms, but we do not get it here. And yeah, it was like wild. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. That's hilarious. Yeah, it has been raining today, and I went out and I work at a plant nursery during the day, and they broke out the bright orange raincoats for the workers, and so I've gotten into photography, so I went out to take some pictures of the workers, and I was trying like to take pictures and not get my camera wet, and so I came back in, I was like, all right, mental note, if you want to do photography when it's raining, you need to bring an umbrella next time. So
well, we forget because it doesn't rain a ton out here in spite of what people think, and so yeah, that does make it tricky.
So I totally forgot what I was saying, though. It was something about the people that I brought on so far. And it's jumping back to your book and the wired for purpose idea. And then what was it you called the was
Rational optimism.
rational optimism? I love that. I'm gonna have to like look at that idea a little bit. I know someone else that I had on. It was AJ Jacobs. Is he's the one that did the Year of Living Biblically, and like he does all kinds of. He's a journalist, but he I think he called it like conscious generosity or something. It was the one where you're like choosing the charities carefully because they're more effective, like choosing to maximize your impact, right? Like kind of like donating to the ones that are most effective. Like, I think it was giving mosquito nets to children with malaria or whatever, like to protect against malaria. And it was like a charity that did that. And he sort of figured this one makes the biggest impact for the amount of money that you give, kind of thing. So it seems like a related idea, like this, like being optimistic, but rational at the same time about how you go about it, and not just sort of the Pollyanna that we're, as much as I love that, just being like happy and cheerful and optimistic, but making some effort to have the impact be effective, right? And actually put some thought into it. I don't know, it seems like a linked idea to me. But so a lot of the people that I have brought are doing projects that are in that vein. So Tom and John are doing a project called Drop Dead Generous, and they're giving away like I think, is it $500 grant? So it's $500,000 to, I always get the numbers mixed up. I told them, what, can you just make it $1 million? Because $1 million is just a better sell. But anyway, they're giving away money to people to spread kindness. And some of the people I've had on the show are from that project, and they're doing smaller projects they're grantees that received grants from this project. So the idea, though, that runs like the through line through a lot of the guests, it's like harnessing this technology in the ways we were optimistic about in the early days of it. You remember the young days of the internet, and it was very much like, look, everyone has a microphone now, and we can all have blogs, and like everybody can make content, and it's no longer you're like dependent on a TV show for like an engineered thing that's made by like a big corporate thing with a big crew. Now it can be one guy with like a quick cam just talking to his computer, and that was a lot of the early stuff had that kind of homegrown nature to it, and I feel like now we're like able to harness the technology in a different way, where it's not just one guy talking to a computer, but it's like, we're using this to bring people together from all over the world and spread good and spread kindness and optimism and these things. And so many people are doing the work, but they're doing it really different ways. So I love that, like, your book seems to be tying that together in a way, the wired for purpose idea. So I don't know, I'll have to read it and see if that's the case, but I
Yeah, I
hope
think there's a
so.
lot of elements of that. I mean, it's not anything that's unique to me, but it is things that I've learned from really smart people, and I've tried to bring it together in a fairly simple way to help people see things more clearly, and again, to help them get further faster. And the really cool thing is in doing the research with my publisher, it turns out there's a lot of neuroscience behind a lot of these phenomena that we're talking about, and that
Mhm.
this whole calmness under pressure, the rational optimism, that you essentially download your calmness into those around you when they are sort of in a world, sort of like the flight attendant. And I know it's funny because my wife has said to me at times when I've been frenetic about things, she's like, you can't do that because I depend on you and this calm energy that you have to keep me balanced, because she has a level of anxiety that she's developed sort of post menopause. And so
Oh yeah, I
she's
know a
like,
little bit about that.
so yeah, the fun little other secret that no one talks about, but
Actually,
it was
my
really
next guest actually is going to talk about that. Angela Burke has just written a book for women over 55
good.
about
Well,
menopause, so that's my next
thank
topic,
you to you, and
actually.
thank you to her for doing that, because we need more of that. And
I'll
so
invite your wife to, watch on that one.
I'm sure she will listen to the episode. Um, but it's one of those things where I didn't realize until, because for me it was like we're driving and I yell at someone and then I blow it off and I've moved on. And for her, it's like that disruption and that sort of breaking out of the calm, quiet energy has a doubling effect on her, where for me
Mhm.
it's like, oh, I got it out of my system and I've moved on. And so anyway, it was fascinating to me to find out about some of these neuroscience and like the amygdala and what the body's reactions are. And so it's not just a gut like, hey, if you say thank you to people, it's a good idea. Or if you're calm, it's helpful to teams. Or if you do this out of the other thing, then people appreciate it. It's no, it's actually rooted in like hundreds of thousands of years of DNA in our bodies that has led us to this place. There's the thunder
That's
again.
fascinating. So
Yeah.
so the rational optimism idea has something to do with that, like nervous system
Yeah.
calmness.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like what you're talking about, like calmness under pressure or when there's a crisis, or is
Yeah,
it?
I mean, so rational optimism is a sort of a broader category, but part of that is this sort of like calm under pressure mentality as well. And one of the things that I don't know if you've ever spoken on stage, you're certainly doing it, in your podcast. But I always
The
try to remind
closest
people,
experience I have, I was a classroom teacher, so I taught at
yeah,
San
so
Jose State, so yeah, that kind of thing.
if you get nervous and you sweat, they sweat, right? And it's one of the first things I've ever said is like, look, if you're on stage, technology is failing you. Don't let the audience see you sweat. Just say, technology, it fails the best of us. Be prepared. Be ready to start your story, even if you don't have slides going on. And so all these things tie together in terms of, the calmness, the rationalness, the being optimistic and helping people guide through difficult events. They all stitch together and they do all have some sort of a basis that's with this, like I said, the amygdala and our fight or flight mechanisms. So,
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to look at that some more because it fits with some of the things that, I mean, just the conversation I had yesterday with Phil about slowing down. He called it like slow happiness, I think was the next title of something he's working on. And we were talking about why you have to slow down to be able to be happy. And I don't know, some of these ideas are definitely linked. But have you ever seen a documentary? It's called, I think, The Day After Peace or A Day After Peace, and it's Jeremy Gilley. Okay, so
no.
I'll send you a link to that later. But there's a moment in that documentary, it's one of my favorite documentaries of all time. It's about Jeremy Gilley's efforts to get International Peace Day established as like get a worldwide day of peace where everybody is like, right now it would be fantastic, but anytime it'd be fantastic. But anyway, there's a point in there where he is about to give a presentation for Coca-Cola, and he's supposed to show his documentary like to a team of like marketing executives, and it cuts off at the wrong place and just fails midway through, and he's just left standing in front of this room full of people, and they just hand him the microphone and they're like, sorry, you can't get the thing to work, you're just gonna have to go. And it's just like this moment of, it happens to all of us where like things just don't go the way you've planned or expect, or the technology breaks or whatever. And it's exactly what you're talking about, that like not panicking and not like falling apart in that moment, because it's like that it's not always going to happen the way that it's supposed to, or maybe it is supposed to happen that way, but it's not going to happen the way you expected, right? So anyway,
Totally.
That's what came to mind when you were talking about the calmness, like or maybe just not letting them see you sweat when you're on stage. I was like, oh, I've seen a moment like that before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, so many things. We're getting close to the end. So I did have, let's see, do I have any other questions for you? And we've gone all over the place, but I'll ask you one of the wacky ones just for the fun of it.
I love
So,
wacky Friday afternoon.
all right. So, which Disney princess would you be and why?
Oh, that is a great question. Which Disney princess would I be and why? I'm trying to think of like one of the strong ones. Who I think I would be is Cinderella. Was kind of a badass because she had mean sisters and she had a stepmom, and she was able to sort of put up with all the bullshit and move forward. So I guess I'm going OG because she's one of the originals, nothing against the new like Moanas and whatever, but I feel like she was kind of one of the cool OG ones that really rose above some trials and tribulations.
Oh, I'm so glad you picked her. She's my absolute favorite, but it's not because of the reasons you named, although those are all fantastic reasons to like her, but it's because of the singing mice. Like that is my ultimate.
I mean,
I watch
right?
it just for the mice. honestly. Oh man, that's my favorite Disney movie. It's also the music. Like I really like the music in that one. And have fond memories of it. But yeah, good choice. All right, should I give you another wacky one? Why
Yeah,
not?
why not?
We got a couple
Sorry about the
minutes.
dogs barking in the background. I think it's
Oh, all good.
the weather is making them crazy. I'll go on mute while you're asking your question.
I have to find another one. Let's see. Let's do. What would I find in your fridge right now?
I'm fishing around to get myself off mute. That's a good question. So right now we're in this sort of odd transition period because we're empty nesters, and my wife and I are sort of trying to figure out where our diet is going to take us because we're both in the mindset of like we probably need to lose 10, 15, 20 pounds, me more than her. But no, it's pretty Spartan. It's like a little bit of leftovers. It's some eggs. It's eggs are always great comfort food. We don't do a lot of dairy these days or a lot of gluten, so
Oh.
not a lot of really exciting things. And usually when we have beverages, we have like Tito's vodka and soda with lime juice, and so we don't really
That's
keep
what I have on
anything
the counter.
beer
Yeah.
or wine in our refrigerator either. So we're
What
pretty
is it called? Ranch water, right? Like the
technically ranch water. I just
yeah.
found this out is tequila and
Oh, it's
soda water
tequila?
and lime. Yes.
Oh, I use Tito's. It's Tito's
Well,
and Topo
I'm with you.
Chico. Yeah.
I think what I've heard it's called is a skinny bitch is the Tito's or any kind of vodka, soda, and lime. But either way, they're both delicious.
I
So
I was I was buying the silly White Claw fruity drinks and then at some point I was like, I could just use the seltzer water and put some vodka in it. It's the same thing. And so I'm just cheap. Like, that's like,
yeah,
but
although
yeah,
the only difference that I found, and this is really getting down into the weeds, is that White Claws are technically malt beverages, where there are things like
sure.
High Noon, which are actual alcohol and some sort of a mixer. And for whatever reason, for me, a lot of the flavoring that goes into the malt beverages is made with what's called an ester. It's a scientific term that I learned back in like 10th grade. And I think some people it doesn't bother. For me, I can just like it has this weird like faux sense or taste to it that makes me it almost gives me like a gag reflex. So if I'm
Oh,
ever drinking the canned
interesting.
drinks, I have to go with the ones that are like the pure alcohol with the pure mixer. I can't do the malt stuff.
That's so funny. I don't know. We used to make fun of them just because a lot of these drinks were like newer things, even the White Claws are sort of a recent phenomenon, but like the ones where it's like Jack and Coke or something, and I'm like, really? Like they're gonna buy a pre-made like, you can use like these two things, guys. Like, but now they sell them like pre-made. It's
Yeah,
just
I
like
mean,
I shake
and,
my
and
head.
people act
Yeah.
like it's the best thing since sliced bread. It's like, this has been around forever and it's not that hard to pour one bottle and then the next can into the same cup. But yeah.
I do feel like it links to some of what we've talked about these changes in technology, where another one I brought up yesterday with Phil was just I went to the library and they had a payphone and I stopped to take a picture because it had been so long since I saw a payphone, and I was like, when did payphones disappear? And I just didn't notice, like the world changes around you slowly and then one day it just everything's different, and it's just part of the aging thing, and I remember like people that were older than me having these conversations about the change, my grandparents and things, but like now it's happening to me. I'm starting to understand how weird that is when you just wake up one day and realize like the world has really dramatically shifted without you noticing, and it's like, when is the last time I wrote a letter? When is the last time I used a payphone? um, so anyway, that's a good place to end. Thank you so much for your time. And this has been a very unusual interview. I mean, we've covered some really
See, this is
disparate
what you get when you
things.
bring a fellow
Yeah.
podcaster onto your
I
show is
know,
you
I
get a lot of
love it.
meandering and co-opting and all those fun things. So, well, thank you for having me on, Jackie. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you so much. Thank you. I'm gonna hang up the recording part and then I'll say bye properly. One
Sounds
moment.
good.